really aliens living on other planets that visit Earth, or are they just figments of our imagination? That's what we're asking as part of today's Supernatural Week.
Well, to discuss this, we're joined by Bridget Barclay, who has allegedly been visited by aliens several times, DC Gary Heseltine, who records UFO sightings, and Sceptic Professor Chris French. And welcome to all of you. So, Bridget, let's start off with your story. Now, the first time that you say that you saw a UFO, you were a little girl, you were 7 years old, and you were living in Devon.
Yes, that's correct.
What happened? What do you remember?
I was out taking the dog for a walk, and what appeared as a Chinese girl, I thought at the time. And a couple of days later, I went back to where she showed me her house was, and it appeared like a gazebo with lights circulating around it, and it was hovering in a field at the time, so not a usual thing to sort of see. And so I always knew that that wasn't actually fits into the paranormal experiences that I usually had, which were ghosts, which I won't talk to you about.
And the latest one that you had was last Christmas?
At New Year, and this New Year I've just had a UFO experience, and last year I had 4.
So why do you think they're attracted to you?
Oh, age-old answer, I don't know. I couldn't tell you. Sometimes I see them as close as, you know, like 5 metres away, or you know, 200 feet away, big structured objects. Now, I can't say.
Biggest and most impressive sighting was in Los Angeles, wasn't it?
Yes, that's correct. Yes, in February '93, I took a girl for a job interview on Rodeo Drive, and was going back to a friend's house, via a friend's house, and stopped at a traffic lights. And I felt very apprehensive of something. I knew something wasn't right. Traffic lights had stopped, and there, to the left of me, I just saw coming over by my windscreen from about 5 metres away a structured silver object, 45 foot in length, massive orange-red power source underneath it, going across the car, going over towards the car in front of me. The traffic lights then went back on. I then went around the corner, looked behind in my rear view window, and I could see that there was no wings, no foliage, and it was taking the tops of the trees off as it went through.
Now, were other people running out of their cars and taking pictures?
It was broad daylight. Well, it was sort of tea time. People going home on the freeway. You had the Holiday Inn, which was the Holiday Inn at the time. You would have thought people would have witnessed it or felt something.
So how come this hasn't been widely reported?
Well,
I mean, that would sort of...
And the trees with all their tops off.
Yeah, well, it actually just ploughed through the tops of the trees. Now, a year later, I got someone to go back and photograph that area for me, and quite clearly you can see a discoloration between the trees from the other trees and the trees that it went through. But more importantly was the fact that 5 military helicopters went to intercept it. Within about 4 minutes, 5 minutes of being back on the same vicinity, military helicopters were going towards the UCLA where it was going.
Do you think you've ever been abducted?
From that incident, something very peculiar happened. I can honestly say, out of all of my sightings, which about 80% I consciously remember, and there's a few things that need to be, like the puzzle needs to be put together.
Well, you said a lot of what you remember is brought out through hypnosis.
No, a lot of what I remember is what I consciously remember, what my conscious remembers. My subconscious is come through on the hypnosis.
Yeah. So that moment in Rodeo Drive, that was a conscious memory?
On the freeway. At the area,
on the freeway,
yes,
that was a conscious
memory until the point of there was feelings behind it, why I felt apprehensive, and those are the things that I wanted to relook at for hypnosis.
Can I just back up what Bridget is saying here? I'm a police officer with 10 years research into this subject, and I work only in the best evidence cases. And when we talk about the abduction phenomenon, what you have to understand that this is not just people sleeping in their beds who might be asleep, sleep paralysis and things like that. You have people who are in their car, multiple people being abducted at the same time. In isolation, these cases seem ludicrous, but when they're happening all around the world, and a lot of people in third world countries relate exactly the same experiences, and yet they don't have the access to the media. So there's something quite clearly going on.
So you are a serving police detective constable.
Yeah.
And you have started off this PRUFOS, haven't you?
PRUFOS, Police Reporting UFO Sighting.
What do the force think about this?
What do the force think about it? I'm not at liberty to say it, but suffice to say that in 10 years of research, I started off with 6 cases involving 10 officers, and now over 425 cases involving over 900 British police officers.
So, Gary, you said that if you went into a court of law, you could provide enough evidence to categorically prove the existence of UFOs. And
it would point very seriously towards E.T.
So what is it? What's the bit of
complex.
evidence that you've got? What I don't.
How long have you got?
Well, about 3 minutes.
All right.
It goes wrong.
All right, then. Well, let me tell you where I come from on this subject. I'm a detective. I look at evidence. I'm trained to look at evidence. I know what evidence is. If I don't know what evidence is, I should be shot.
Right.
All right? So I know what evidence is and what would stand up in a court of law. And when I look at the best evidence of the subject, not the 97% that can be explained and rationalised in this interpretation, the 97% leaves 3%. At the hardcore of the 3%, there are 2,000 military pilots who've gone on record, often in intercept situations, 75-minute dogfights, confirmed on airborne radar, ground radar, 3,000 commercial pilots. There are astronauts and cosmonauts who've seen these things and gone on the record.
Really?
There are hundreds of radar operators, observer corps, people who study the sky. There are hundreds of air traffic controllers who've seen these things. But unfortunately, the media does not report the best evidence. I'm not interested in the 97% that can be explained. But if you look at the hardcore,
well, come back and bring us the best evidence. We'll report it for you.
I'll put you a challenge. I'll give you some evidence, and I want somebody like Chris here to explain it to me.
Well, Chris, I'd love that.
Well, let's do it. That's it. We're booked.
We'll make that happen.
You're taking over my life. You're organising it. Last time it was on ghost hunts.
Supernatural
Sounds
week
good to me.
extends.
Sounds good to me.
We're off next week, but we'll sort this out for when we come back. Why wouldn't it be true? Why would you say this can't happen? Why couldn't it happen?
I don't say it can't happen. I say I'm not convinced by the evidence that's available. I mean, there are a couple of big assumptions in Gary's approach there. One is that, you know, he accepts that 97% of cases have mundane explanations, things like air balloons, things like meteorites, whatever. He accepts that, but says it's the 3% that don't have those obvious explanations that he thinks point towards E.T.
Chris,
No, let me say, I'll let you speak. My argument would be, why do you assume that you would be able to explain 100%? As a police officer, you'll know that the police cannot solve every single case that they investigate. There are some where the evidence just isn't there anymore to explain what was going on.
But I'm talking about the cases where they are there.
Now, there's also another...
And that's what we should be talking about here.
Also, another implicit assumption in what Gary's saying, which is that
I can quote
for some
you chapter
reason,
and verse on evidence.
you know, police officers, pilots, people like this are kind of much better eyewitnesses than other people. Now, research has been done comparing...
Show me that research.
I can show you that. I can read...
Because I can quote the Battelle report in 1955 in America. Hang on a minute. This is a perception that I've heard on TV all the time. All right, the Battelle report in 1955, commissioned in 1955 by the US Air Force. It studied best calibre, highest calibre witnesses, and it concluded very strongly that the better the trained observer, the better the quality of the unknown sighting.
There is recent research.
We're up against the clock.
Yeah, I know.
So you've got no.
I want you to quote me chapter and verse.
About 40 seconds now. You can have the final word because we will come back and do this again.
So as I say, the current psychological research shows that actually police officers are no better eyewitnesses than other people.
Absolute rubbish.
Also, they don't have any special training when it comes to sighting. You say we have special training for sighting UFOs.
No,
that's what I'm saying.
What are police officers trained to do?
Right.
I am trained to record in a chronological, factual way, and you are not brushing it off like
guys.
that. Chris, you're talking in assumptions. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
So that gives me a little
I am
bit of
trained to
credibility.
record with my eyes, my perceptions, and read it chronologically, write it up properly. And when police officers, 72% of my cases...
We have to stop. We have to stop. But the news is bearing down on us.
But we are going to bring your evidence and bring you back together and discuss this
72%
again.
of my cases are multiple officers.
Thank you, Bridget. Thank you very much.
300 not
We'll be back after the news.